stopped into a church. I passed along the way. Well, I got down on my knees, and I pretend to pray. You know the preacher like the cold. He knows I'm gonna stay.
Chapter 4. Come on, people. Love one another right now. KPPC-FM, Pasadena Presbyterian Church, May 23rd, 1966. I was in the basement of the church putting together an audition tape. Along with California Dreamin', the recent smash by the Mamas and the Papas, I had a couple of Beatle albums and 2 current hits, The Ballad of the Green Beret, and Nancy Sinatra and Lee Hazelwood's These Boots Are Made for Walking. My tape would be up to date. Working once a week was the crutch keeping me from going after a full-time DJ job. The music business and EPI was a ton of fun, but it was really Smokey and Murray's career, not mine. Bob Mayfield was now the program director at KPPC. He wanted me to work Sundays 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. instead of the 2 to 10 p.m. I'd gotten comfortable with. That was the final straw. I decided to break away completely. I finished my tape. On the way out, I bumped into Al Harrion, the new sales manager. Al was a nice guy. He told me he liked my air work and wanted me to stay. He promised to get the station moving. He had plenty of ideas, none of them new. On the drive home, I listened to Richard Beebe do the news on KRLA. Beebe was also a Pasadena Playhouse alumni and Ken Rose's student. Maybe I should concentrate on news. I was a good reader, but once you did news, it pretty much killed your chances as a DJ in the same market. Back in the Valley, the party was on for John David's 3rd birthday. A big Batman fan, he was delighted when he got a Batman suit. He was flying around the backyard, his cape flowing in the breeze. Charles dressed up as the Joker. The dozen kids at the party were all knocked out by his characterization. Charlotte Stewart Considine was also at the party. She looked fantastic, and I had hungry eyes all over her. She and Tim invited us to watch the Indy 500 on Memorial Day via closed circuit at Grauman's Chinese Theater. I was excited by the invitation. When the kids OD'd on the birthday party and finally went to Batman Dreamland, Charles, Smokey, Charlotte, Kate, and I lit up and grooved. The next day, I took my audition tape to the only 2 radio stations that had an opening for a full-time DJ. One was KNOB, the jazz station in Hollywood. The other was KTBT-FM, Garden Grove, 50 miles away in Orange County.
Did you ever have to finally decide and say yes to one and let the other one ride? There's so many changes and tears you must hide. Did you ever have to finally decide?
KTBT, Garden Grove, Orange County, 6/6/1966. Program director Frank Ernest had called. They liked my audition tape. I drove for an hour south on the Hollywood Freeway to the interchange, then down the Santa Ana Freeway past towns I didn't know existed, and finally into Garden Grove in KTBT. Frank showed me the news machine, introduced me to the morning man, and asked me to sit down and do a couple of hours starting with a noon newscast. I read the story about our Surveyor soft shot landing on the moon and sending back photographs. The Soviets had beat us to the moon, but we were catching up. This is KTBT-FM 94.3 from the heart of Orange County, I said, punching up the circle's red rubber ball. I had found the #1 hit song in a stack of unopened albums and was digging for more when Frank raced into the control room. "We don't play that kind of music," Frank Ernest said, as straight-faced as a guy with that name could. "What would you like me to play, Frank?" "Well, you know Mr. Berliner owns a Latin publishing company, and he likes the disc jockeys to play some Latin artists." "Fine," I said, fishing out a copy of Perez Prado's Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White. David Russo and Carlos Marcello would be right at home here in good old Orange County. I'd have to send them a postcard. "By the way, Frank," I asked, "what station were you with before you came to KTBT?" "Oh, I wasn't in radio," he answered. "I worked at the bank. I handled Mr. Berliner's bank account. This is my first radio job." That's about right, I thought. A banker for a PD. This is some kind of zoo. Oliver Berliner had inherited a fortune. His grandfather invented the Berliner microphone. Oliver must have figured the best way to promote his Latin music was owning a radio station and playing Latin until people bought it. The idea was right, but nobody seemed to know how to execute it. I guessed I could do Latin. Sleeping till 9 a.m. and DJing noon to 6 would certainly fit right into my lifestyle. After a couple hours on the board, I met the manager, Michelle. She was 30, blonde, beautiful, only a bit stocky, and very congenial. She was also Oliver Berliner's girlfriend. They were ready to hire me and pay just enough to make it worth the drive. I asked about KTBT's future. She showed me the plans for the new broadcast booth and the showroom. What showroom? I asked. The video showroom, Michelle answered. Oliver owns the distribution in Orange County for Sony and Panasonic videotape machines and cameras. Isn't that exciting? You bet it is, I said. I'll take the job. I love driving the Santa Ana Freeway, and the 2 hours commute every day will be fun. I'll be on the air tomorrow at noon. Before I go, though, would you be kind enough to tell me a little bit about Latin music? I've always been interested in it, and I just need to know who the artists are. And by the way, what's the name of Mr. Berliner's publishing company?
In 1966, Truman Capote wrote In Cold Blood. Frank Zappa released rock's first 2-disc album, Freak Out. And the Supreme Court upholds the right to remain silent in Miranda versus Arizona.
Laurel Canyon, late June 1966. If there was one guy in Los Angeles who was a bigger Bob Dylan fan than me, it was Tim Considine. Kate and I were often up at the Considine's house. While she and Charlotte became closer friends, Tim and I were listening to track after track of Dylan. I genuinely liked Tim, but beyond our interest in folk rock, our backgrounds were extremely diverse. I was a Cajun farm boy trying to make it in the city. He was an Angelino rich kid with showbiz lineage and early success on My Three Sons. He decided to leave the hit TV series to segue into movies. It was a big gamble that most TV actors at the time felt like they had to take. He would get some movie roles, but never the one he needed. Worse, he got a part that probably contributed to the decline of his career. In the movie Patton, George C. Scott slapped a cowardly soldier, was reprimanded, and forced to apologize. The actor playing the dirty little coward was Tim Considine. Sometimes Hollywood is a crapshoot. Danny Truitt was back in town. He'd been on the road several weeks as a dancer working opposite Juliet Prowse. The kid was quite taken by her, talking constantly about Prowse, her dancing ability, her great legs, her sexy face. Meanwhile, he'd missed a good supporting role in Sand Pebbles, shooting in the Philippines and starring Steve McQueen. One weekend in late June, we helped Smokey move into the house overlooking Laurel Canyon. To get to it, you had to make a 180-degree turn onto a gravel driveway that climbed 50 yards at a steep angle. At the top was the house, complete with deck and surrounded by trees and vegetation. The structure was hanging out over the canyon more than 100 feet below. Smokey was an ace at finding a dynamite pad and giving it the appropriate name. He called this place the Hideout. The next Friday, I finished my shift at KTBT, feeling good about the progress. By now, I knew how to pronounce Tito Puente and was trying to figure out a format of pop, big band jazz, and Latin that would make some kind of sense. On the drive back to Hollywood, I was listening to the new KHJ disc jockey, the real Don Steele. No question, this guy was going to be the top jock in town. We all met at the EPI office, then went over to Epic Records recording studio to cut Smokey and Murray's groovy Go-Go Girl Should Carry My Fender. Stewart and I clapped and sang on the chorus. It was a real high. By midnight, we figured we had a hit in the can. A half hour later, Charlotte and Kate, Smokey and I were at the Hideout. We went up on the deck, got loaded, and watched the third quarter moon come up and hang low over the City of Angels. We grooved on the summer night and each other till the early morning chill set in. Then we went inside, lit the fireplace, and smoked some more. Smokey and I laid back on the two big sofas while the girls whispered in front of the fire. By the time dawn was breaking through Laurel Canyon and the fire had burned itself out, the two girls had taken turns on both sofas.
In 1966, the National Organization for Women, NOW, was formed. Masters and Johnson's Human Sexuality Response was published.
Hollywood, July 1966. My day started at 10 a.m. at the EPI office in Hollywood, taking care of paperwork. On to Garden Grove to do an easy shift on KTBT. There weren't many commercials on the log, although these guys were fairly adept at trading. The sales manager had made a trade with the Tokyo Spa, an Anaheim massage parlor, a stone's throw from Disneyland. I was back in Hollywood at 7 p.m., stopping by Charles's apartment. I had been helping him with his personal accounting since 1963. He couldn't balance a checkbook and was always running behind on his bills. Today was no different. Jesus Christ, David, Charles was saying, how does the average poor bastard like myself keep up? Suppose I had a wife and kids like you. I couldn't support them on what I make. Just keep on going, I encouraged. Something will break for you. Yeah, maybe someone in the gang will make it really big and give the rest of us working class stiffs a break. I know I would if I could. Sure you would, Charles. Any of us would. Sometimes I'm not sure about all of us, Charles said. I could tell he was starting to grow a thin, bitter edge. One of the guys at work said I should declare bankruptcy, he said, staring at the brown vegetation on the Hollywood hillside. I don't want to lose my car, but I might have to. I left Lockwood Air pumped up as good as I could get him, then back to EPI to meet Stewart, Murray, and Smokey. There were two other people at the office. One was a guy named John Linksweiler from El Dorado, Arkansas. He knew Smokey from high school, had heard he was doing well in Hollywood, and came out to give acting and producing a shot. Howdy, Dave, he grinned broadly when we were introduced. I'm Link Weiler. Link had already shortened his name for the marquee. He was 100% hick, looked something like a young Slim Pickens, probably didn't have a shot in the world. But anybody who changes his name the first day in town bears watching. Link moved in with Smokey. Tim Considine introduced him to a producer friend. Link went dove hunting with the producer. In 6 months, Link Weiler was working regularly on Gunsmoke. The other guest at the EPI office was a beautiful young brunette actress who had just won a talent contest in her hometown of Sebastopol, California. Her distinct voice quality and fresh sexiness said, All-American Girl Next Door, cast me. One of thousands who came to Hollywood every year, but this girl was different. Her name was Karen Valentine. I spent a few minutes with my EPI partners. They had several big projects working, including the possibility of new talent. Karen and Link were both possibilities. I excused myself, heading for my next stop, the Cellar Theater. Sorry, guys, I gotta run, I said. We're trying to get rehearsal going on a show called La Ronde at the Cellar. Ken's been agonizing a lot lately. He's in a foul mood. Brother Dave, Smoke said, we're going to have to name you Trouble Buster from now on. Ah, Trouble Buster, huh? I like that. Good name for a guy on the move. Accurate description of what I like to do. At the Cellar, a dozen actors were standing around waiting. Ken Rose hadn't shown up. What's cooking? I asked Bud Tedesco. Bad news, Bud said, looking glum. Pete's on the phone now over at the Padre. Ken beat up his wife. He's in the can. Pete Pastoria arrived with the details. Ken had been drinking all day and finally had blown up, manhandling Patty Rose till she called in the cops. He needs bailing out, $500. Where are we going to get that kind of money? Pete asked. I'll handle it, I answered. That's my job. That's what I do. At the downtown L.A. lockup, I laid 5 C notes on the counter and they gave me Ken. He was remorseful, apologetic, and feeling awful. Davy boy, he said, I can't handle it by myself anymore. You got to be my producer on this show. Take some of the pressure off me. Don't worry about your money. I'll pay you back. Sure, Ken, I said, knowing the 500 in Long Green would have a short memory. No problem, Ken. Producer. There's all kind of ways to make it in this town. I just discovered another one. Hollywood, August 1966. Doesn't seem to be a shadow in the city. The real Don Steele had just punched up the Lovin' Spoonful smash, Summer in the City. If there was anyone in L.A. hotter than Don Steele, it was John Sebastian, singing lead and chalking up the hits with the spoonful. Stuart Margolin had scraped enough money together to rent a camera. He was shooting his Involution script on 16mm with Dave Banks Jr. as his producer. His crew included Murray McLeod and Link Weiler as grips and lighting men. Smokey and Charlotte were recreating their Cellar Theater roles for the camera. The shoot was happening days at the Hideout. At night, on the same set, Kate and I were partying with Charlotte and Smokey. Karen Valentine had been invited to join the CBS Actors Workshop. She asked Smokey, Kate, and me to attend one of their presentations. She was going after her career full speed. One hot August night, we went to the Hollywood Bowl performance with Mike Stroka and Effie. Josh White opened with his big, booming voice and acoustic guitar. The headliner was a new folk singer named Judy Collins. She sang Hey Nellie, Nellie, Hand Me Down My Gun, a Civil War traditional, and a driving composition by Papa John Phillips called Me and My Uncle, with the unforgettable line, Me and my uncle went riding down from Colorado to a West Texas town. It was the first time I'd heard either song. Mike Stroko was on his way to New York to try his luck acting on the soaps. Within months, he would score a starring role in Dark Shadows. Effie was leaving KPPC to join the traffic department at KADS, KADS, a new Los Angeles radio station with the outrageous concept of wall-to-wall want ads, a solid 24 hours, every broadcast day. Kate would replace her at the bottom of the church as operations manager under KPPC sales manager Al Harriet. I came away from the bowl thinking about Judy Collins' blue eyes, golden voice, and driving guitar. Folk music could be my answer in Orange County. I stayed up until 2 a.m. composing a letter to Michelle, KTBT's manager. I outlined the need for a flow of new music from the record distributors in Los Angeles, the timely introduction of new releases into our format, and the organization and maintenance of a record library. Since I was the only employee living in Los Angeles with proximity to the music distributors, I was a natural for the job. But I needed the title of program director to make my official rounds with the record people. Since Frank Ernest was the program director, the situation called for some diplomatic maneuvering. Simple, really. Make Frank the assistant manager where he could exercise his executive skills. The next day, before my shift, I presented the letter to Michelle over coffee. She listened politely. She said she'd talk to Berlina. 2 days went by while Frank Ernest gave me snide looks. Then Michelle asked Kate and me to join her and Oliver Berliner at a Kingston Trio concert in Ontario, 50 miles east on the San Bernardino Freeway. While the Kingstons sang Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley, Berliner flirted with Kate and gave me the job of program director. I told him how excited I was to be a part of the empire he was building in Orange County, and how folk groups like the Kingston Trio and Judy Collins were the best ways to attract an audience. Berliner said folk was okay, as long as I played his Latin and stayed away from rock and roll. As the Kingston Trio sang, Michelle and I kept accidentally touching knees under the table. The next day I was all over the record distributors. A call to my old mentor, Graylin Landon at RCA, gave me the names and numbers. One of them was Doug Cox at Atlantic Distributing. He seemed like the nicest guy in the world and went out of his way to get me the record company product. It would be 5 years before I really got to know Doug Cox. Most of the record distributing houses were on Pico Boulevard below Wilshire on Los Angeles' south side, so I stopped by on my way to Orange County. I was trying to move into folk, pop, jazz, Latin format. I was listening to a ton of music, auditioning albums, track after track, doing it till the wee hours of the morning. One Saturday afternoon, Smokey pulled me away from a stash of records with a phone call. "Hey, Brother Dave," he said, "why don't you and Kate get a babysitter and come on up to the hideout? We'll turn on, get a little scene going. A friend of ours says she wants to see you guys." "You got lots of friends, you old double-dealing devil. Who are you talking about?" "Here, I'll let you say a word to her," Smokey said. "Hey, Dave, why don't you and Kate come on up?" said the voice on the phone. My heart was pounding double time. I would have recognized that voice in a windstorm. It was Karen Valentine.
Don't you know it's a pity the days can't be like the nights in the summer, in the city, in the summer, in the city. Cool cow meeting in the city, dressed so fine and looking so pretty. Cool cat looking for a kitty, gonna look in every corner of the city.
Hollywood, Orange County, September 1966. In Louisiana, as in most of the country east of the Rockies, you can feel the coming of autumn. You can actually get a premonition on a cool August morning when a deep breath tells you there's a sniff of football in the air. In Southern California, there's little distinction between the seasons. This year, fall sneaked up on me with a running mate nostalgia, and once again I had no defense. On Labor Day, we'd gone to a drive-in movie with Shell and John David to see the new Batman movie. Jim Bachman was getting ready to head south for Dallas and Louisiana. He'd spend several weeks scouting locations for a new movie to star Faye Dunaway, Warren Beatty, and Gene Hackman. The movie was titled Bonnie and Clyde. Charles Laquadera was still in a rut. He took us to see the movie Years of Lightning, Days of Drums, as more conversations and controversy centered on the JFK assassination plot. When a television special with David Susskind interviewing Bobby Kennedy and Pete Seeger aired, Charles made sure we all watched it. On December the 8th, NBC premiered a new show called Star Trek, starring a young William Shatner as Captain Kirk and Leonard Nimoy was cast as Spock in the only role he'd ever be able to play. At KTBT in Orange County, we were airing the old Lone Ranger radio serial on Saturday evenings. John, the sales manager, put together a promotion with a tract home developer for the Lone Ranger and Tonto, including horses Silver and Scout, to spend Sundays giving horseback rides to kids while their parents toured the new homes. John cast himself as the masked man. I was a Cajun actor with a suntan. I got the job as the Indian. It was a real kick playing Tonto. I mastered talking the halting speech I'd heard from Jay Silverheels, the Tonto of screen and radio. I spent a lot of time practicing my quick draw, so I was handy with a gun. Riding a horse was as natural as driving a sports car. All I needed was a part in a Hollywood Western. The small children who came out to see the Lone Ranger and Tonto at the track homes were thrilled. So was I. I was now driving to Orange County 7 days a week. I tried to talk Smokey into doing my Saturday afternoon DJ shift, but he could feel himself closing in on a hit record. After playing music all day at KTBT, I was hustling back to Hollywood to put the EPI office and books together, then stopping in at the cellar to do my producer's job. I was definitely on a fast track, and I was worn out. But I was also high on the job, the music, and Valentine. We were all spending a lot of time together. When her mother was in town, Karen Valentine asked us to join them for dinner. We were all family. In late September, Smokey and Valentine came out to the valley to have dinner, smoke, and party. When Kate and Smokey fell asleep, Karen Valentine and I talked till daybreak, watched the sunrise, then made breakfast for John David and Shell. We were both aware it was autumn. Changes were coming down. For San Francisco, the summer of love was 1967. In Los Angeles, it was 1966. We started a year early.
Gather round, all you clowns, let me hear you say.
KTBT, Garden Grove, Orange County, October 1966.
That summer we enjoyed it, wind and rain and shine. That umbrella we employed it, by August she was mine.
I only flashed on Valentine a couple of times when KRLA disc jockey Reb Foster played the Hollies' Top 10 song as I drove the Santa Ana Freeway to Orange County. After 4 months at KTBT, I couldn't see much progress. The morning man, and especially Bernie the night jock, played the Latin cuts dutifully and seemed to have a better feel for them than I did. I was still playing catch-up, learning which were the most playable tracks. Of course, the artists like Vince Guaraldi on A Taste of Honey, or any of Sergio Mendes in Brazil's 66 was easily workable. I needed to just relax into it. Radio was radio. Sure, the music was important, but being on the air and working regularly was more important. Afternoons really agreed with me. Even a 5-hour shift was relatively easy. The air checks told me it was my best work yet. Keep working and learning. I'd get my shot. The right opportunity was just ahead, somewhere. Meantime, I would concentrate on playing the right songs. The right song has power, no matter if it's folk, rock, jazz, country and western, or even Latin. So how do you pick the right song before it hits the charts? Just as important, how do you precede it and follow it, especially playing a 2 or 3 record set? Is there really a correct time of day to play a particular record? What about rotation? How often? Program directors wrestled with these questions, each developing their own particular format. But that's all formula, not the real thing. The real knowing is the instinct to pull the right sound at the exact moment. You just know or you don't. You can pick hits or you can't. Your own taste, that's all you have, right or wrong. If you want to capture a big piece of the market, you have to be in tune with the times and the city. Putting the right sound together is an elusive business. Arriving at KTBT early, I spent a few minutes quizzing Frank Ernest on the progress of the new on-air booth that would look out into the video showroom. Then I auditioned albums for an hour. At KTBT, I was building a good folk section and ran across a group that would fit right in. The group's name was catchy. They were called the Stone Ponies. The more folk than rock sound was well produced, but the lead singer was really dynamite. Linda Ronstadt was knocking me out. A tone-deaf sales manager could have heard Hitmaker all over her voice. Rather than pay me back the $500 of bail money, Ken Rose offered me half ownership of the Cellar Theater if I threw in an additional $500. I put the money in his hand the next day. On October 12th, I turned 25, a program director of an Orange County FM station, producer and part owner of a workshop theater in Hollywood, and a partner in an up-and-coming music business. A long way to the top, but a fair start on grabbing a small piece of this town by the butt. I was worried about Charles. His obsession with JFK kept him in front of every Mark Lane TV show. The military buildup continued in Vietnam, and a numbed response was settling in on all of us. When our parents came to town, Rusty drove Casey into Hollywood to see the publishing office at EPI. Lounging around talking with Smokey, Casey picked up the harmonica that Donovan had left behind on an earlier visit. He began to blow Lily Marlene, the one-time German military march turned plaintive theme for the boys of World War II, on the same harp that Donovan blew protest on Universal Soldier. John David and Shell were attending Montessori Learning School. We knew the teaching style was right. The kids progressed at their own pace in a very loose setting. Shell, at 2, was still a baby trying to put sentences together. 3.5-year-old John David was developing his social skills, a sense of humor, and a somewhat offbeat personality. For his art class Halloween party, he went dressed as a hobo.
Bus Stop was written by Graham Goldman, who also wrote Heart Full of Soul and For Your Love for the Yardbirds, and No Milk Today for Herman's Hermits. He later formed the band 10cc, who had the hit I'm Not in Love. Donovan was good friends with the Beatles and originally subtitled Sunshine Superman for John and Paul. Jimmy Page played lead guitar on the recording.
North Hollywood, November 1966.
Take the last train to Pottsville and I'll meet you at the station. You can be here by 4:30 'cause I've made your reservation. Don't be slow.
It took 8 weeks for a last train to Clarksville to get to the #1 spot. By that time, nobody cared that Davy Jones, Mickey Dolenz, Michael Nesmith, and Peter Tork were more actors than musicians, playing a part on a TV show about rock and rollers. Over 400 actors and singers had turned out for the Monkey auditions, including would-be stars like Stephen Stills and Paul Williams. Smokey Roberts and Murray McLeod were among them. With the year winding down, 1966 hadn't lived up to its promise. Smokey came down from the canyon into North Hollywood one Saturday afternoon. "Brother Dave," he said, "we're going to have to close the EPI office. I hate like hell to admit it, but none of us can afford the rent." "Hey, let's hang on a while longer," I said. "You guys are writing great stuff. You and Murray are a great team, and the hits are there. I know it." "I know it too, partner. But Stu and Murray won't out by Christmas. We'll keep working. We'll just have to go underground for a while. Take a low profile." "What about the Tiny Tim tapes?" I asked. Stewart had succeeded in putting Tiny Tim under an EPI manager's contract. We raised enough money to go into the studio for a session. "The whole town laughs," Smokey answered. "Tiny Tim is just too weird for them." The coming demise of EPI didn't stop me from wanting to enhance my image with a new set of wheels. In Southern California, you are what you drive. Atlantic Richfield was still counting the barrels of oil back in Louisiana, but I was getting a piece. So one night, John David and I drove into Hollywood and bought a 1967 black 912 Porsche. He could hardly contain himself. Neither could I. On November 8th, Charles and I sat down in front of the TV to watch the election returns. All over the country, Republicans won big. California Governor Edmund G. Brown was beaten by the ex-actor Ronald Reagan.
You can be here by 4:30 'cause I've made your reservation. Don't be slow. I love the colorful clothes you wear and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair.
Hollywood, December 1966. It was 9 p.m. at EPI. Smokey, Murray, Stewart, and Link Weiler were all packing up the boxes of tapes, sheet music, and myriad of personal items that had gravitated to the Hollywood address over the past year. The office was being closed, but there was only optimism in the air. We were all harmonizing on the Beach Boys song that had entered the charts at number 80 and moved steadily up to number 1 in a month and a half. The boys at EPI sounded real good, except for Link. Everybody was real stoned. Smokey had a part in a movie called The Cat. All were either working as performers or had something coming up. I left them to finish the packing. The black Porsche climbed the Vine Street on-ramp, heading north on the Hollywood Freeway for the last leg of my 14-hour day. At home in the valley, my boyhood pal, Woody Bernard, had just finished up his last stateside dinner with Kate and the kids. He was shipping out the next day from Los Angeles for Okinawa and Southeast Asia. Well, I'm sure going to remember. I'm going to remember this meal, Woody stuttered. From now on, it's monkey meat for me. Despite his slight speech impediment, Woody had always been a talker and a storyteller. You wanted to go to Nam, didn't you? I asked. Woody cocked his head to one side and grinned. Wanted to go, he replied. Ever since this war started out, I've been trying to figure out how to get there. That's when I decided on the Green Berets. But they almost sidetracked me. What happened? I asked. Hell of a story, Woody said, leaning back. I'm punching 16,000-foot holes in the Gulf of Mexico over the oil company, and I'm having a good time, right? So I get this wild hair to be a beret. They put me through a year of training. I got outdoor living skills to match an aborigine. They dropped me off in the Okefenokee Swamp down in Georgia. Give me a knife and a piece of string. The captain says, Go get it, Cajun boy. You still alive in a week, you'll be a Green Beret. When they picked me up, I'd gained 4 pounds. I'd been studying the political history of Vietnam for six months. All of a sudden, they tell me I'm not going to Nam, I'm going to Panama. How did that happen? Kate asked. Well, let me tell you. It seems the Berets have a detachment in Panama that's responsible for digging water wells for the populace. They pulled my records. See, I dug for gas in the Gulf of Mexico. They figure that I can dig for water in Panama. Most guys we know would call that a streak of luck, I said. Me, I'm pissed, Woody replied. So I go for Sergeant Major and tell him my problem. He says, go get 2 bottles of Johnny Walker Red. So I do that. The Sergeant Major keeps 1 bottle of Johnny Red for himself. Me and him take the other bottle to a guy in personnel who makes a few changes on my record and assigns me to Okinawa. I want to go to Nam, I say. Take Oki, he says. They send you to Nam, but since you're based in Oki, they got to pay you extra travel duty pay for every day you're in Nam. So it cost me 2 bottles of Johnny Red, but I'll see all the Nam I want, and every day the sun comes up over the jungle, I'll be getting travel duty pay. If anybody dies and leaves me a fortune, send it to my address in Oki. What will it be like in Vietnam? Kate wanted to know. He proceeded to tell us what he was prepared to do. He would be flown by chopper to an area in Vietnam. While the chopper hovered, he'd climb down a ladder into the jungle. He would link up with other Green Beret operatives in the native Montagnards. After an incursion lasting days or weeks, he'd be pulled out of the woods for a while, and he'd be sent right back in. Woody was honed to a sharp edge, tough and confident. He was ready. We talked till midnight. It was the last long conversation we'd have for a whole lot of years. Kate told him to write. He said he would. At KTBT, I kept playing more folk and less Latin. Frank Ernest would lurk around the DJ booth to let me know he was listening. Don't forget, Mr. Berliner likes to hear his records played, Frank would say with his I may have to rat you out tone of voice. I let Frank and Michelle know that I wanted to be program director and function as well. When a part-time disc jockey didn't like his schedule, he took his complaint over my head to Frank. The next day, I axed the DJ. Berliner backed me up. He liked that kind of action. Winchester Cathedral by the new vaudeville band was a big hit and totally safe for our format. For once, LA's top rock jock, the real Don Steele, and I were playing the same song. I was feeling at home in Orange County. One night when I got off the air, Kate and I, Danny Truitt, and his new Austrian bride, Gabrielle, all went over to Melodyland to catch Les Girls, a big production number with dancing and costumes galore. It was right down Danny Truitt's showbiz alley. On December 15th, Walt Disney died. The next Saturday at KTBT, I worked 6 a.m. until 12 noon while Kate, John David, and Shell picnicked and played in the video showroom among $250,000 worth of cameras, recorders, tripods, and sync generators. Then we were off to Disneyland, which had gone all out to pay tribute to the founder. For the kids, it was Disney's characters, color, and spectacle. They didn't even hear the man's voice in the crowd behind us who was moved to say, "God bless Walt, he sure did a lot for us," as Mickey Mouse and Goofy led the parade down the facsimile of Main Street, America. The year was coming to a fast close. Charlotte and Tim Considine dropped by North Hollywood to give us a ride in Tim's new Mercedes. Tim was really loosening up. Vince had disappeared. Cheryl said he was on a Zen trip studying with the Roshi, a Zen master in South Los Angeles. Charles was watching Mort Saul on TV, who continued to blast the Warren Commission. Link Weiler, after finishing up a shoot on Gunsmoke, came into Hollywood with us for the Christmas parade. We stood with the crowd watching the celebrities' floats go by, Shell on my shoulders, John David on Link's.
Electrical banana is gonna be a sudden grace. Electrical banana is bound to be the very next phase.
On Mellow Yellow, Donovan gave a nod to his friend guitarist Bert Jansch, who was part of the very successful British folk rock group Pentangle. At the recording session, it is rumored that Paul McCartney whispers the "quite rightly."
I thought love was only true in fairy tales, and for someone else, but not for me.
Hollywood, January 1967. I left Louisiana on January 2nd to get back on the air at KTBT. Kate and the kids stayed behind to lengthen the visit. Tonight I was maneuvering the Porsche through heavy traffic on Santa Monica Boulevard while the Monkees sang "I'm a Believer," the Neil Diamond composition and their second major hit. On my mind was Karen Valentine. Karen was very serious about her acting career. It was the only thing that meant a great deal to her. She was interested in joining the Cello Theater's acting group, but doubted if we could keep her busy. Ken Rose had fallen into a pattern of doing a couple of shows a year, then the rest of the time agonizing about picking the right script and the perfect cast that would uphold our reputation for quality work. Karen Valentine felt the cellar was moving too slow. She wasn't the only one who felt that way. One night, after a particularly frustrating evening at the theater, Bud Tedesco and Pete Pastori cornered me. "Let's go talk," Pete said. Over coffee at the Two Guys from Italy pizza parlor, Bud picked up the conversation. "We can't be so damned afraid to fail," he said. Pete added, "If I have to listen to one more night about our goddamn high standards, I ain't coming back." "Me neither," Bud said. "The whole company is ready to walk out." "Look, I agree with you guys," I said. "Every 2 months we should have a new show on the boards and another one in rehearsal." "Yeah," Bud said. "Give more actors a chance to work." He was speaking in a low voice, kind of grinding his teeth. You could tell he was getting pissed. "Well, it's up to you," Pete said finally. "I'll see what I can do," I said. Several days later, I telephoned Ken. I told him my work schedule was too heavy and I was resigning from the group. On the other end of the line, I could hear Ken take a deep breath. "Davy, I understand what you're doing," he said. "The Chinese have a saying for it. It's called killing the chicken in order to frighten the monkey." Late the next evening, Ken called me back and said he was ready to throw in the towel. Suddenly, I was the sole owner of the Cellar Theater, climbing to the top Hollywood style. But I didn't like the way it had all come down. KTBT, Garden Grove, Orange County, January 27th, 1967.
Yeah, you know it ain't but one thing. You know this black man he did was wrong. Yeah, you know it ain't but one thing. Yeah, you know this black man he did was wrong. So what was that?
You know that's when I moved my wife and family. I moved them down on Metatomo's phone.
I was listening to Tom Moore's Farm by Sam Lightning Hopkins as he took his Eat Your Heart Out blues guitar ride. Sam Hopkins had spoken, and I had heard. It had only been a few nights earlier when we were playing Dylan songs that Tim Considine pulled out a stack of blues records and introduced me to Lightning Sam, recording on Arhoolie Records. Today I was on the air at KTBT and Latin Records were blasting out over Orange County, but inside the booth, on the audition channel, I was listening to Lightning Hopkins because he fit my mood. I got up from the control board, walked out to the broadcast booth, and wandered through the video showroom, looking through the viewfinder of a Panasonic camera. Ah, television, magic, sight and sound, color, motion, emotion. One of these days, I want a television station. But I'll start with a couple of these Jap cameras down at the cellar. I'll have the first theater in Hollywood to train actors in camera technique using videotape. Through the door of the teletype room, I could hear the clanging of the bell, notifying newsmen and disc jockeys all over the country that something was coming down. Urgent, 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 clacked the teletype. Then slowly, methodically, it spelled out the message. Astronauts Grissom, White, and Chaffee were killed today at Cape Kennedy when an accidental fire engulfed their capsule as they sat waiting to go through a pre-countdown test. I stood stunned for only a moment before hurrying back to the broadcast booth. Quickly pulling the headset over my short-billed Beatles-style cap, I read the story into the microphone. As soon as I could fire off another Latin record, I called Lacudero on the phone. He was taking everything too seriously. I wanted to get to him before another wave of depression grabbed him. He was shocked by the tragedy. It was the first major NASA accident, and it occurred at a time when we were all beginning to feel invincible in space. I talked Charles up, and we firmed plans to see a movie that evening. The film starring Burt Lancaster was called The Professional. It showed how a group of professional hitmen could have assassinated JFK. We were convinced that this is what actually happened. On the way home from the movie, we stopped to talk with Bud and Mel. Once again, we rehashed the assassination. One of the evolving theories pointed at New Orleans and Carlos Marcello. Kate rejected that possibility since she knew Mr. Carlos and believed him to be like her father, David Russo, basically a good family man. Charles didn't think the mob had the power to assassinate the president unless aided by the CIA. We were convinced the country was being lied to about the Dallas murder, and all the conspirators were out there, going scot-free. We were being sold a bill of goods. Lacudero swore it would be his lifelong mission to expose the truth.
One of these old dinner times, I told him, no, Mr. Moe. Whoa, somebody's gotta go. Yes, he said, if you ain't able to fly, Sam, step there and grab your hoe. And I had to cry. I stepped off to myself and I cried like this. Lord have mercy.
Hollywood, February 1967. When Smokey met Rolla, a honey blonde 20-year-old model, I knew it was all over for him. Smokey called me in a few days, his voice dancing with excitement. Within a few hours, he was in our living room in the valley, Rolla by his side, his Martin guitar in his lap, singing the lyrics of the hit song we always knew would be coming. A couple of weeks later, I was driving in from KTBT at 8 p.m. I peeled off the Hollywood freeway and drove to the A&M studios. Inside, they were laying down the tracks for Sunshine Girl. It was Murray and Jerry Riopel's melody, Smokey's lyrics. All three were on the vocals. The new group was called The Parade. Laying down the lead acoustic guitar was a quiet, skinny kid named Jimmy Messina. From here, he would go on to produce Buffalo Springfield's final album. Then he would form Poco. In the 70s, he would team up with Kenny Loggins for 6 years, produce 8 albums, and numerous hits like Mama Don't Dance, Angry Eyes, House at Pooh Corner, and Vahivala, as Loggins and Messina became household words. But tonight, Jimmy Messina was still a kid with quick fingers on an acoustic guitar, playing lead for The Parade. Jerry Riopel had been a producer for Phil Spector. Everyone knew something about cutting a hit record. Stuart Margolin and I stood in the control room looking out into the studio with all that talent. Stuart had already developed some of the personality of Angel, the character he would become on Rockford Files. He had a grin 6 inches wide. You could feel the excitement. This song was going to be a hit. Anyone with half an ear could tell you that. For several months, Vince had been studying Zen Buddhism with the Roshi, a Zen master residing in East Los Angeles. Unlike Charles, who went down every morning at 4 a.m. to meditate in the Roshi's presence, then going about his daily life like the average Angelino, Vince had actually moved into the Roshi's quarters, devoting 24 hours a day to his spiritual enlightenment. During this time, in this holy place, Vincent D'Onofrio met the great poet and singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen, who would soon write The Sisters of Mercy and Hallelujah. Vince and Leonard became pals, hung out, went out. Even as they pursued this path of enlightenment, it would still be all right, getting together to show a girl a good time. When Vince sang Leonard Cohen, he was talking to all of us.
If you wanna love her, I'll do anything you ask me to. And if you want another kind of love, I'll wear a mask for you. If you want a partner, take my hand. Or if you wanna strike me down in anger, here I stand. I'm your man. If you want a boxer, I'll step into the ring for you. And if you want a doctor, I'll examine every inch of you. If you want a driver, climb inside. Or if you wanna take me for a ride, you know you can. I'm your man. And if you need to sleep a moment on the road, I will steer for you. And if you wanna work the street alone, I'll disappear for you. If you want a father for your child, or only wanna walk with me a while across the sand, I'm your man.
North Hollywood, early morning. Bonnie and Kate played singles in the adjacent court while the babies, John David and Shell, and their daughter Heidi, played on the gym set a few yards away. Today only the guys were out. John David accompanied us and was playing with his trucks on the cement court. He was loading and unloading imaginary sand, gravel, and fill dirt, perhaps building that new leg of the Hollywood freeway that would cloverleaf at Victory Boulevard 2 blocks from our home, cutting 30 minutes off our daily round trip from North Hollywood to any and all points, south, east, or west. John David was working away on his construction project with all the confidence and bravado of the macho 4-year-old. John David was simply reflecting what he'd been observing from the two tennis players on the court. Cameron and I went at it like it was Wimbledon. I really liked Cameron. He was the epitome of cool, good looks, great intellect, sense of humor, and a hell of a tennis player. Kate and I were spending a lot of time with Cameron and Bonnie. There was a heavy sexual undercurrent going on in the relationship. Swinging at Hit Hollywood, the four of us were toying with the possibilities. To spice up our game, Cameron and I were teasing each other with a bet. Winner of the match would get the other guy's wife for an evening. We played the best tennis of our lives, split the 2 first sets, and as the sun was setting somewhere west of Encino, I took the final set 7-5. I didn't expect Cameron, or Bonnie, to honor the bet, at least not right away. We were only kidding, of course, but the ego rush that went with the winning and the fantasy was better than any drug high. We had a good laugh, loaded John David and his armada of trucks into the Porsche and headed for home. What I didn't know at the time was that Cameron was already collecting his winnings every afternoon for the past 3 weeks, while I played disc jockey an hour's drive away in Orange County. Hollywood, March 18, 1967. The number 42 song on the Billboard Hot 100, Sunshine Girl by The Parade, had been 4 weeks on the national charts, breaking in at number 87. In Los Angeles, Sunshine Girl was even hotter, bubbling under the top 10 on KHJ, KRLA, and KFWB. California rockers all up and down the coast were giving it heavy play. Smokey Roberts' Ode to Rolla and the spring of 1967 had struck a chord that was reverberating all across the nation. Anyone in the music business lives for this moment when you know you got a stone-cold hit.
When we made contact, she touched my soul and I felt the full impact.
We all sang as I wheeled Cameron's car up Laurel Canyon toward the hideout. We'd driven out to Malibu to watch the sun go down over the Pacific. Smokey and the Sunshine Girl were in the front seat next to me. Cameron was seated in the back between Kate and Bonnie. He was too stoned to drive, so I took control of the wheel and the buttons on the radio. We hung around the hideout for a while before hitting the streets again for dinner. We cruised Hollywood first, then crossed over the canyon into North Hollywood and Van Nuys, punching up and down the top 40 AM rockers to see how many times we could hear Sunshine Girl. We got to sing along a half dozen times between 9 p.m. and midnight. We dropped in on Charlotte for a drink and a smoke. Tim Considine was playing National Guard for the weekend. President Johnson had announced plans for a draft by lottery. 19-year-olds would be called first. All deferments would be cut by January 69. Anyone not in the Guard was scrambling to cover his butt. Muhammad Ali would not serve in the army because it was against his Muslim religion. We could all get behind that. Killing or getting killed wasn't anything any of us wanted to do either. Back at the hideout, Charles had arrived. We spent the rest of the night singing and smoking. Smokey and Charles debated Zen issues. Charles dubbed Smokey Reverend Roberts. At dawn, we walked out onto the hillside, barefoot in the wet grass. With a red Indian blanket wrapped around him, Buddhist style, Reverend Roberts stood outside a small maintenance building on the hillside. The building had an open window looking down 50 feet to the bottom of Laurel Canyon. Stating that he believed he could really fly, Smokey stepped into the building. As we stood aghast, we saw Smokey run through the building, past the open door in full view of all of us. Then he leaped out the open window toward eternity. Actually, what went out the window was Smokey's red Indian blanket, while he slid down out of sight below the window. In our sleep-deprived, stoned-out state, the split second was too real. It was as close to a real Zen trip any of us had ever been. North Hall's not up yet. What are you talking about? I asked incredulously. I got to go get my head straight, she said. Well, wait a minute. We'll wake up the kids and we'll all go. I want to go alone. I'll see you later. The next sound I heard was the front door slamming and the Porsche firing up in the driveway. What in my mind was a super marriage and a fantastic relationship had been rapidly deteriorating over the past few weeks. Kate was moody and distant. My attempts at digging for the cause were met with denials of any problems or vague references to not being happy. Bonnie told us she was sure Cameron was seeing someone. He was asking her to iron his shirts before he went to class. So my buddy was getting some on the side. Too bad about what he was doing to his wife. I couldn't figure out my own problems, so I responded by working harder, leaving home at 9 a.m., being a program director, DJ, music producer, and actor-producer until returning at midnight. Kate returned from the beach in a somewhat better mood. We loaded the kids, picked up Charles, and went to Elysian Park. 20,000 people had gathered for one of the first love-ins in Southern California. The sound of flutes and drums and the smell of incense and marijuana was overpowering. The flower children were beginning to band together and celebrate their lifestyle in public. All over America, they were abandoning society's rules, tuning in and dropping out. The revolution was underway. On this Easter in Elysian Park, it was peace and love. children and dogs, and flowers in your hair. It would soon escalate to clubs and rocks, tear gas and bullets. Hollywood, Tuesday, March 28, 1967. On the way in from Orange County, I made my nightly exit at Cahuenga Boulevard, stopped at the Cellar Theater to confer with Peter Pastori and Bud Tedesco, then headed up Laurel Canyon for a meeting with Smokey at the hideout. He met me at the door. "Partner, you better get back down to the cellar," Smokey said. "Tedesco just called. The Padre Hotel is on fire." I gunned the Porsche back into Hollywood and arrived on the scene to find the L.A. Fire Department fighting a blaze in the section of the Padre Hotel that stood right above the cellar's basement theater. Smoke was pouring from the roof. Pete and Bud were looking grim. There was no danger to the cellar other than water and smoke, but the writing was on the wall. The fire-damaged portion of the Padre would be condemned within 2 weeks. The remainder of the building would be razed. The stage where we had created laughter and suspense would be 6 feet under asphalt. In a few months, it would all be just another Los Angeles parking lot. We were jobless actors without a theater. My tenure as a producer was short-lived. The changes around me were coming too fast. Kate became progressively colder. On the morning of April 4th, I packed some of my clothes, hugged John David and Shell, and told her I was moving out. I would stay away until Kate decided what she wanted or what she wanted me to do. "You have to decide," was all she said. The day's work of spinning records dragged on. Then it was time to go somewhere. I had dinner with Bachman, talking videotape. Then finally at midnight showed up at the hideout where Charles was already rooming with Smokey. "Sorry to show up late," I said to Smokey, who met me at the door in his shorts with his guitar in one hand and a joint in the other. "Come on in, Brother Dave," he said. "You know how it is when you're family. It don't matter what time of night it is. When you knock, we got to get up and let you in." Charles was in the corner, sitting in a yoga position, meditating. He came out of it long enough to say, "We've been expecting you." The next week was like a bad dream. Unable to sleep, I found myself in Barney's Beanery with Charles, shooting pool at 2 and 3 a.m., or smoking until dawn with Smokey, getting up 3 hours later and dragging ass down the freeway to KTBT. By Friday night, I was exhausted and fell asleep on the living room floor at midnight. Somewhere around 4 a.m., I woke up to Charles's voice. "Has he been there all night?" he was asking. "Yeah, he's worn pretty thin," Smokey said. "Poor bastard. He still doesn't know, does he?" "I guess not." "Who's going to tell him?" Charles asked. "He'll figure it out, sooner or later," Smokey replied. Figure it out? Figure out what? My mind was racing as a gnawing ache started in the pit of my stomach. I pretended to be asleep for an hour until Smokey and Charles went to bed. Then I slipped out of the hideout and drove into the valley at daybreak. The lights were on at Babcock. I unlocked the front door. John David and Shell were having breakfast around their little table. They ran to meet me with excited shouts. "Daddy! Daddy, you're home!" Shell exclaimed, hugging my knees. "I missed you. Where you been, man?" John David said. "I missed you guys terribly, too," I said. "Sorry I left. I guess that's just one more mistake I made. Y'all up a little early, aren't you?" Then looking at Kate, I asked, "Just coming in?" She looked at me briefly, then went back to pouring milk for the kids. "Where is he?" I asked. "On the patio," she answered. It was barely daylight, but close friends are easy to recognize. Cameron grinned at me sheepishly. "It's all over, pal," I said. "I know," he replied, then stopped me as I turned to go back inside. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. "It was just one of those things. I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry." "Sure," I said. "It happens in the best of families." Inside, Kate followed me into the living room. "How long?" I asked. "A while." "A while?" "A few weeks. Does it matter?" "I guess not." "We were just coming in to change the babysitter," she said. "I'll be back tonight." "I'll be here," I said. "I want to start over." "I know," she replied. KTBT, Garden Grove, Orange County, April 1967. On April 10th, the city of Los Angeles sent an eviction notice to the Padre Hotel. We had already salvaged the dimmer board, a few seats, and some other essentially worthless equipment. We began the frustrating search for a new home for the Cellar Theater. On April 16th, the leaders of the anti-war movement staged a rally in New York City. 100,000 people attended. draft cards and flags were burned. On April 24th, Oliver Berliner called a 2 p.m. meeting of the staff at KTBT. It was the middle of my shift, so I put on the longest Latin record I could find and stepped out of the booth. Something was in the air. Frank Ernest was even more snide than usual, and Michelle wouldn't look at me. Berliner beat around the bush a bit. The video department was off to a slow start, but he was really optimistic about the future. The Latin publishing firm was going great, carrying the load for the other companies. "Here it comes, Bernie," the night jock muttered to me under his breath. "Bend over and kiss your butt goodbye." "Only KTBT is a big disappointment," Berliner continued. "It isn't Frank and Michelle's fault, and certainly isn't the fault of our on-air staff, but sales are just not keeping up with our expenses, and we're forced to make some cuts. Frank has come up with some answers. We're going to do what many small stations are doing. We're investing in automation equipment. Of course, that means we'll no longer need the services of our disc jockeys. It doesn't mean you're fired. The automation won't arrive for another 2.5 weeks, so you'll have at least that long to find other employment. We appreciate your loyalty and effort." That concludes this meeting. So Frank Ernest had evened the score in a left-handed sort of way. What do you expect from a banker in a radio station? You might as well have an accountant selecting the music. I've been reading about automation. I wasn't totally surprised by Berliner's decision. Somewhere along the line, I knew a robot would go on to get my job. In a way, I guess I was thankful it was this job at KTBT and not a radio show on a station that could have taken me all the way to the top in the ratings. The other jocks were devastated. I was numb. I'd been on automatic for a month now. I was on a fast train heading downhill. Charles said I was backfeeding my problems with negative energy. Smokey called it a king-size bummer. Vince sent me this story from the Zen Playbook.
Here in the West, we tend to believe that our mind and body are separate things. We argue about whether or not what we think can affect our bodies and whether our bodies can affect our minds. Here's a 5,000-year-old story from China that may help you decide. There was once a man who was invited to a banquet in honor of a prince. At the moment when all of the guests raised their cups in a toast to the prince, the man noticed a small poisonous snake floating in his wine. Rather than bring attention to himself and disrupt the proceedings, he quickly drank the wine down. After arriving home that evening, he became ill, and as each day passed, he became increasingly worse. Doctors were brought in, remedies were tried, but nothing worked. He became sicker and sicker till it was obvious he would soon die. As a last resort, a wise man was brought in to see him. The wise man asked if it would be possible to go back to the scene where he drank the wine and swallowed the poisonous snake. So, they went back to the banquet hall, located the very spot where he had sat, filled the cup with wine, and he again raised it as if to toast the prince. And there again, floating in the wine, was the poisonous snake. The wise man, seeing this, looked up to the ceiling, where there, carved into the artwork, was a quite innocent poisonous snake reflecting down into the cup. When the man realized the poisonous snake was only a reflection, he became well again. Dr. Zen says, watch out what you swallow. As you believe, so you become.
KTBT, Garden Grove, Orange County, early May 1967. I was on the air at KTBT, totally bored. All enthusiasm gone, just marking time until the automated equipment got hooked up and made my skills obsolete. Charles Laquadera was in the video showroom talking with a salesman about the equipment. This was his third trip to Orange County with me to check out the video gear. He was excited about it and trying to fire me up too. At Charles's urging, I mortgaged my furniture in Kate's VW, raised $1,000, and bought a basic video rig, camera, tripod, and VCR deck. What was left of the Cellar acting group began meeting at Bachman's house. It was centrally located below the Hollywood Bowl, just a few blocks from where the old theater had burned. Bachman was glad to have us around, excited by our efforts, and felt we were headed in the right direction. We'd meet twice a week, perform scenes in front of the camera, then critique the tape. Tim Considine and I had several meetings about the use of video in my acting workshop. He thought Charles and I were onto something. I was ready to link up with Tim, which would have been a good move for both of us. We even found a site near Hollywood High School. But Charles was cool to the idea. He was holding out for a facility large enough to rebuild the cellar stage, and eventually the timing for Tim and me passed us by. In San Francisco, Ralph Gleason and Jan Werner formed a new magazine to write about the emerging counterculture. They called it Rolling Stone. A disc jockey named Tom Donahue, having built KYA into the boss of the Bay, was Mr. Radio. And all across America, Aretha Franklin was burning up the airwaves. Hollywood, mid-May 1967. By mid-May, Sunshine Girl was number 25 nationwide, and Smokey was a staff writer at 8M Records. I auditioned for a rock station in Palmdale, 50 miles north out in Antelope Valley, but nothing happened. I just didn't seem to have what they were looking for in a top 40 jock. May 12th was mercifully my last day at KTBT, and I was once again without a microphone. On May 15th, I drove my Porsche up to the unemployment office and filed for benefits. Then I looked up Vince D'Onofrio. The past is but a dream, Vince was saying. The future doesn't exist. The eternal now is all there is. Live in the present. Live in the moment with all your being. The recent reversals in my family, business, and career had devastated me. I was borderline distraught. I was ready to listen to anyone. Vince had the truth according to Zen. I could have done worse. Too much greed, too much graft, Vince continued. It's like this crazy Vietnam thing. Under the guise of being the world's policeman, we're fighting the communist, but it's all meaningless. 1 million souls will perish and nothing will change. Only more billions of dollars line the pockets of the military-industrial complex and the defense establishment. We should be policing our environment. We're all too caught up with catching the boogeyman to look around and smell the air. The real aggression is in the corporate boardrooms of America. There was a lot of radical left in this Zen student. Then Vince began to personalize the lecture and hit home where I lived. So what happens if you and Smokey and Charles ball half a dozen starlets per night? Vince continued. You're not any better or worse off. What happens if through hard work or luck you're able to build the #1 rock and roll radio station in this town? Nothing will change. You'll still be you in the eternal moment of the majestic flow of life. You must experience ego death, the giving up of yourself. Then you can really live life, experience it, and be in it. You must die to be born again and live. But you see, I'm preaching to you, using words and ideas to describe what can only be experienced. Drinking water is only understood by drinking water, not by reading or hearing about it. There is no scripture in Zen. It is the wisdom of the absolute mind. Man, beyond all creatures, has the ability to reflect on life. We objectify it. That's when we lose our absolute wisdom. Through the study and practice of Zen principles, we strive to regain this wisdom. Once you've done that, then you can become a new human being and able with this knowledge to live in the eternal now. What Vince was saying was making a lot of sense, except that I couldn't believe that building the #1 radio station in the City of Angels wouldn't make some kind of irreversible change in one's being. I went home and put the Revolver album on the stereo. I skipped to the last cut on side 2. It sounded to me like Vince D'Onofrio and John Lennon were on the same trip.
Tomorrow Never Knows was the Beatles' first psychedelic song, which Lennon was inspired to write after reading The Psychedelic Experience, based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
North Hollywood, late May 1967. What can you do with a woman when she got a backdoor friend? She's just praying for you to move out so her backdoor friend can move in. Backdoor Friend, written by Sam Lightning Hopkins and Stanley J. Lewis. From an introduction to Zen, we segued right into psychodrama. I learned that my problems and Lightning Hopkins were basically the same. A few thousand years of the sexual double standard was coming to an end. The sisters were fixing to even the score. In psychodrama, I came face to face with Kate's point of view as she told it, no holds barred, to an actor friend playing my part. My words and attitudes spoken by him often sounded hollow, indefensible. We acted it all out in front of the video camera, then played it back and studied it. While the sexual revolution was sweeping the country eastward like a hot Santana wind, we were already wading through the fallout of failure, searching for answers, carrying a video camera. Deciding to take this enlightenment even deeper, we started setting up the camera in the living room at parties. Charles, Kate, Vince, and I took turns as camera operators, recording what was going on with the subjects in front of the lens, and also revealing a great deal about what trip the cameraman was on. Our favorite activity became having dinner while the camera sat stationary, locked down on a wide shot. Eventually, we would forget it was on, then forget to be cool, forget to act. We decided you could learn everything you needed to know about a person, be it yourself or someone else, by watching him dine.
Some slow, some speed bumps, don't you work as hard as you play. Make a break.
Creek Alley tells the story of the formation of the Mamas and the Papas. It references John Phillips' friendship with Scott McKenzie, If You're Going to San Francisco, along with the beginnings of the Byrds and the Loving Spoonful.
And California dreaming is becoming a reality.
Hollywood, June 1st, 1967. Sunshine Girl was at number 12 on the Billboard, a breath under the top 10. Smokey, Murray, and Riopelle were already overdubbing their voices for the parade's first album. To my ear, only Frog Prince and Every Time I Turned My Radio On were candidates for a possible follow-up hit. But the sound of the summer of '67 was already sweeping onto the radio. The Doors' Light My Fire and Procol Harum's A Whiter Shade of Pale were telling a different story. The innocence of the early '60s had persisted past the point of relevance, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band was blowing it all away in a flood tide of creative new sound. Kate was uneasy. Taking John David and Shell, she left by train for an extended stay in Louisiana. I began to question what I was doing in Los Angeles. A town with that much concrete, steel, and dirty air is no place to raise kids. A combo of events, the cell of fire, the automation of KTBT, the near breakup of my family had me asking a lot of questions. By day, I hunted the streets of Los Angeles and Hollywood looking for the site of the next Cellar Theater. We needed 2,000 square feet of space at an affordable price of 10 cents per square foot. By night, I talked the philosophy of life with Smokey, Charles, and Vince. My sister Russie was into reincarnation. She and I spent several evenings delving into her world of mediumship, allowing spirits to speak through her, a practice that took 20 years to become the hot California fad known as channeling. She also claimed to engage in astral projection. KTBT rap line.
Hey, Dave, it's your sister.
Hey, Russ, where you at?
Well, we're in a phone booth, and we're on our way to Disneyland. I have in the car Lisa, Leslie, Mikey, and Deanie. And we got you on the radio, and we thought we'd hear you better down here.
Yeah?
And we're just wondering if you could play Seasons in the Sun for me and Deanie, because it's our favorite song.
All right, yeah, Season in the Sun, Rod McEwen, great writer. Yeah, I'll get it on. I'll play it for you. So, tell me again about Deanie.
Oh, it's she's an heiress, Deanie Honeywell. She's
Yeah?
a beautiful California girl. She's into Kabbalah and just everything New Age. Right now we're studying religions of the world, and of course we're traveling.
Yeah, I know the kids were in Louisiana while you were traveling.
Oh my God, and did we appreciate that. And of all the places that we went, I think we really enjoyed the excavated Pompeii.
You went to Pompeii?
Yes.
Pompeii? Hey.
Well, we were there lifetimes ago.
All right, okay.
Well, long lifetimes ago.
Yeah. So where'd you meet Deanie?
Well, she came to the class that I'm teaching at the home of Carmen Montez. That's where I'm doing the meditation and the channeling classes. And she's wanting to know all about the movie that I was working on with David Sequeiros. It was the documentary in Mexico City. You guys took care of the kids.
Yeah, we did. So where do y'all meet? Where do y'all get together?
At Carmen's apartment.
Yeah. Where's that?
Well, I think that you and Karen should come because she'd really love it. David's hidden
Yeah,
up
Karen
above.
would. Kate loves that kind of thing.
Oh, yes, she would. She'd love it. And, of course, you get a free reading, too.
Yeah.
It's hidden up above Coenga Boulevard, and it's near the Hollywood Bowl, and It's apartment 37. I could tell y'all how to get there.
Yeah, well, that's Bachman's neighborhood. Of course, the cellar's right down there in Cahuenga in the Padre.
Absolutely.
So it's really kind of above the cellar.
Right, and it's near Uncle Jim's pink house.
All right. So listen, tell me just. I got to run because my record's running out. But
Okay.
tell me a little bit about the
Okay,
classes.
well, real quick, the classes are free, and we get lots of incense and candles, but word of mouth is spreading. We get 30 to 40 meditations sometimes, and they all want a free reading. But real quick, Dave, sometimes there's a knock on the door when everything's quiet and it's already dim candle, and this old man comes in with a limp. He has an old brown felt hat pulled over one side of his face, and Carmen has a special chair for him.
Uh-huh.
But we all know who he is. Listen, man, the kids are yelling Disneyland. I gotta run. Thanks for queuing it up. You sound good.
Russie's best friend was Aries Deanie Honeywell, a beautiful California girl who was also into Kabbalah and everything New Age. Their friend and teacher, Carmen Montez, lived in a secluded apartment nestled in the residential area of Highland down below Hollywood Boulevard. Carmen's frequent guest was known by his nickname, Bud. Since Russie and Carmen were sisters in a past lifetime, Bud kind of looked at all of them like blood kin, since he and his sisters, Joycelyn and Frances, had grown up with Carmen. She would fix his favorite meals from his boyhood and lay out gold satin sheets where he rested from the intensity of the white-hot limelight. Russie had to listen closely when he spoke, even close up and personal. Marlon Brando mumbled his lines. I was facing the most unsettling period of my life. No one at home to relate to, no stage on which to step out of my skin into someone else's problems, no groove to slot the needle in, no microphone to turn on. Hungering for the ride, I wandered around the big town with only the music and the voices of other disc jockeys to keep me company.
Stopped into a church. I passed along the way.